Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session on grassroots finance and equitable investment models. Hi, my name is Juguna Gishoro, and I'm a lab leader with the People's Economy Lab, and I'll be facilitating this discussion. Today, we have a group of amazing local leaders and experts in this area. We're looking to have a free-flowing conversation about some of the developments in grassroots finance and investment and some of the things we want to envision and see grow in the future and some of the challenges that we're dealing with. And so I want to thank Communities of Opportunity for giving us this opportunity to connect. I already know these folks. They're amazing and brilliant, and I think they have a lot to offer our audience. And so just to give you a brief intro, we have Sandhya Nakhasi, Chief Investment Officer at Community Credit Lab, Dionne Cook, co-founder and CEO of Densham Capital, and Gavin Amos Lopez, who's a navigator with Central Area Collaborative and also co-owner operator of Avo Coffee and co-founder of BIPOC Infrastructure Services. And so would like to start by having folks introduce themselves. I have let everybody know who you are, but if you could please let us know your name again, give us your pronoun and any other identifying information you'd like us to know. And then tell us a little bit about your organization and its work. And so we'll start with Sandhya.
Thanks, Juguna. Happy to be here with everyone today. I am Sandhya Nakhasi. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at Community Credit Lab, as Juguna mentioned, and I use she, her pronouns. Community Credit Lab is a nonprofit organization based here in Seattle that partners with community organizations to design and implement affordable lending programs for people within their communities. So if an organization has an idea and a gap within their community around accessing affordable credit, we can support them to figure out a way to design a program, test it out, and if it is working well, then we can work with them to continue to scale up that program. And I will pass it off to Dionne.
Thank you. My name is Dionne Cook, co-founder of Densham Co-op. We're a social purpose corporation that looks to provide access to affordable credit to Black-owned businesses in the area. We're just, looking to provide resources to businesses that typically haven't had access to them through lending. So that's it in a nutshell. I look forward to sharing more later. Go ahead, Gavin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gavin Amos, he, him pronouns. I have a couple titles, but most importantly, I focus on my work with Avo Coffee and being able to continue building our platform to not only be able to serve quality coffee and create a great atmosphere for people to be productive and feel safe in, but to also find creative ways into engaging community and helping to work on some solutions. And then from that, I gained the opportunity of becoming a community navigator with the Central Area Collaborative, where I connect with legacy business owners within the Central Area community and find ways to route resources to them, whether through technical assistance or through programming from out of the Central Area Collaborative. So some of those things may look like, I may help them get a grant, find a way to have them install signages or get a mural and other, creative placemaking techniques.
All right, thank you, Gavin. And so as we start this discussion, I wanted to start off by sort of framing the subject, right? Grassroots finance and equitable investment models. And so in looking into this, finding a definition, the best one I think I found was that these are models for investing or lending that place leadership, decision-making power, and ownership in the hands of the grassroots stakeholders, right? And in this case, we're talking specifically about Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And when we talk about grassroots stakeholders in those communities, the people themselves, right? grassroots organizations that are led by those people, and also businesses and other non-investors. When we're talking about grassroots finance, we're also talking about financing and accumulating capital from non-institutional folks. And so with that being the subject, I really wanted to start by talking to Dionne about Dencham and your journey to Dencham Capital, because one of the subjects we're looking to sort of focus on during this session is also anti-Blackness and identifying it within systems around us. And as we're talking about the financial system, would love to hear about your journey and how you came to starting Dencham. What were the problems that you saw for Black small business owners in the traditional financial system that prompted you to move in this direction?
Yeah, definitely. Just looking at, historically, if you look at the numbers, the number of, I think it's about half of Black applicants to bank loans are denied. Credit scores aren't, a lot of traditional lending resources look at credit score, they look at tax return, and they look at collateral, given historical reasons and documented discrimination. That we don't have a lot of resources as far as collateral. Credit scores are overlooked without really taking in, the reasons why a credit score might be lower, and tax returns aren't always there either for different reasons. So I think what we're trying to build, or what we built here at Dencham, is taking away some of those factors that often led to, loans being denied or applications being denied, and really looking at community impact and trying to minimize those boundaries to getting funds.
That's amazing. And Dionne, knowing your background, I know that you're somebody that didn't come right from a traditional financing background, which I find amazing and really representative of the grassroots, right? Seeing the problem in your community and stepping into the space. Can you talk to us about, was there a moment that you encountered this problem, it became clear to you that prompted you to decide to move in this direction? And how did you come from, what background do you come from, and how did you shift into this world?
So I have a background in education, primarily elementary and a little bit of middle school. Also have a background in business management, human resources. And lastly, a little bit of community economic development. My wife and I, we joined Peace Corps back in the day. We were in Paraguay for 2 years, a little over 2 years. So did some community economic development work. And really at the core of it all is relationships. So even though I didn't have the technical background, I work on building relationships. That's in the classroom, that's in, the community, that's in business. Like without relationships and building community, you can't be successful in business. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I hear you. And when it came to moving into this space and really learning about the world of lending and finance, you become an expert and somebody that's been involved with empowering businesses through capital. What was that growth process like for you? For those in the audience who may be interested, right, in moving into this space and seeing problems, what was that process like for you, learning about lending and banking? How did you do that?
First of all, I'll never say I'm an expert. I'm still learning right now. And I think the biggest thing is just surrounding myself with people that do have that background, asking questions. I don't think there goes a day goes by that I'm not asking for guidance and assistance from either people in the legal background, people in the finance background, community building. Like there are plenty of experts out there that I depend on. And hopefully it's a mutual relationship that I value to what they're doing as well.
Thank you. And Gavin, as someone that's both an entrepreneur, an organizer in community, and a leader that's sort of influencing thought around these issues, you've seen the issues of barriers and access to capital particularly for Black communities and other BIPOC communities on the front lines. You've gone into creating programs like BIPOC infrastructure services to solve some problems related to capital and empowerment. And can you talk about what you encountered as a small business owner in terms of barriers around capital and financial systems, and how that motivated you to create new things and new models?
Yes, most definitely. Well, along the lines of my personal experience, I come from a business, and then that was owned by someone from the area. And as I started to learn more and more about the dynamics of the neighborhoods, I ended up finding out that South Seattle is seen as a place that is considered cash poor, but high in productivity. And oftentimes, as I gained more connections with the community, I started to see that how many businesses survived on just grit and being able to maintain a certain level of performance every single day, even though they don't have the best cash environment. And then that made me think of capital a bit more creatively, and understanding that you don't need just cash to maintain a business or to maintain supports in the community. So there's other forms of capital, and that may not, in our current system, is valued monetarily. So that's when I really got interested and really looked into researching this, and then ended up being asked to be part of some organizations that help organize other businesses. And I started to find out about other forms of capital. There's things called working capital. So being able to have enough competent hands and minds pitching in together can be a source of generation of monetary capital, or be able to stay in business. Then there's community capital, having connections and being connected within the neighborhood and the people who are living in the neighborhood. And then there's what's called business capital, knowing people in your circle that have certain skills that can help you progress as an entrepreneur. So having mentors and people who are invested in your business, that's beyond being a typical customer. And then there's the last form of capital. So there's working, there's human business, and then I think it's financial capital, which is the money, right? So those are the 4 forms of capital I started seeing and then paying attention to. And then I realized how the things I was benefiting from essentially becoming an owner by sweat equity, right? So for me, the agreement was like, I'm willing to invest into the business as long as, I'm able to make do on all my financial obligations, right? So I work unlimited amount of hours, but what I started benefit from doing that was that I was learning at a high level, and then I was able to apply a lot of my experience. So I spent all this time in school not really having a place to apply some of the things I was learning in school, the things I was experiencing in school. I didn't really know how to take my passions into a tangible way in the world. So that's where like Oval had a really positive effect on me, was that I could see how the skills I learned from Oval doesn't have to be situated just in coffee. And there's a lot of skills that I have just from my family environment that can be beneficial to others around in the neighborhood. And then from that realization, I understood that I'm one of many youth who experience the world like this. So there's a lot of youth and untapped potential in our neighborhoods that could come in and have a positive effect on our businesses and communities and be more connected in the neighborhoods by undergoing a similar type of participation. So that's where I envisioned the program I came up with, is like, how do we create a system intentionally where not only are we able to explain like our environment well to youth, to where they can make better decisions, but also be connected to the environment, so they're encouraged to want to interact with that, right? So many folks grow up in the neighborhood believing that you either got to go to school and get a really good job with these tech companies or corporations to be able to make a living, and what that does, it actually takes a lot of our young talent away from our neighborhoods into where we could possibly affect the economic environment. So it's like creatively finding ways where individuals can take those skills back to the neighborhoods that they're from and be able to grow and cultivate their neighborhood economy. And that's a way for me, like the quickest way to generate intergenerational wealth and be able to, at a high level, be able to stimulate the local economy. Because, and then we see cases like this around the neighborhood where you see certain communities be doing business with each other through their cultural goods that are unique to them. And that's a way where we see models like that create generational wealth for certain individuals. But to be able to apply that as a intercommunal level, I think could be very transformative for the Black and Brown community. So that's our design parts of the program to where, we could find ways of paying people at a position at all levels of learning.
Thank you, Gavin. I think that's amazing how you're framing and reframing what capital is. And so wanted to talk to Sandhya about Community Credit Lab. Your work kind of enables lending programs that reverse traditional financial risk and return analysis to support and give people affordable credit. As we're looking at grassroots finance, right, and a more impactful form of capital, like Gavin's talking about, it requires reframing, right, of these basic concepts of finance. How has CCL been able to do that to find support for the programs you're developing in partnership with community organizations?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Jaguna. I would say the work that we're doing at CCL is always at the direction of our community organization and lending partners. So we are not directing them on any certain framework that they should be using, any certain metrics that they should be following when designing a lending program. In fact, what we do is ask them to come to the table and forget everything that all of the existing frameworks, because we know that those existing traditional frameworks of evaluating credit worthiness are quite extractive and exclude a lot of communities of color, as well as along the lines of gender and many other factors that have excluded many other factors that exclude communities from being able to access credit. So we ask our partners to come to the table and just start from a place of relationship and trust. And I was on a call earlier today where it was really put well, this notion of when we are designing this program, it's with the notion of wanting to say yes to a person. How do we create a pathway to saying yes and not finding all of the loopholes to say no? And I think that's where we are really trying to focus a lot of efforts, is where we see a lot of people saying no, how can we turn around and say yes? How can we use relationship and trust as a way to say yes? How can we look at other factors and other criteria as a way to extend credit and extend it affordably instead of creating more barriers for communities? I think to the second part of your question of how is this received? I think for the community organizations that we're working with, that's received really well. But I think at the financial institution level, it does require a big shift in thinking. It requires a really big shift in moving away from the credit box that I've been so trained in terms of a lot of the underwriters that I've worked with, and a lot of underwriters in financial institutions are trained to try to see what fits within this really narrow box and forget the rest. So moving away from that really requires a fundamental shift in thinking and an extension of trust and building relationship.
Thank you. And this question is open to the whole panel. It seems kind of from all your comments that sort of building relationships that can help to navigate these contradictions and opportunities is really critical. Doing this the right way seems to require the leadership and power of community, but also expertise that is often outside the community, right? And leverage that is outside the community. And so I'm wondering if you all can speak to how you've worked to build relationships that between community and allies sort of in these large stakeholder groups and institutions, and maybe if there are community folks out there that are looking to build relationships that are equitable in these other spaces, what have you seen that has worked to build those relationships?
Can you ask your question again?
Well, yeah, sorry, it was a really long question. But yeah, just it seems that it's critical for communities, grassroots community leaders and organizations, and folks that are in the world of finance and investment to sort of come together and build relationships to sort of navigate the contradictions and the complexities of what it takes to build sort of new models of capital and lending. Just wondering if you all have seen that done successfully, and if so, what are sort of the keys to building successful, equitable relationships that can allow folks on the grassroots side and the community side to connect with folks in maybe institutional finance who have the expertise they may need to create something. So, of course, we have the great folks at CCL have created like one of those bridges. How do you, as a community organizer or community member, make those connections?
I think the hard part about that is that there's already a deficit that hasn't been made. So like oftentimes folks are working from behind, where there's still an expectation in a lot of parts of our community, the Black community, that if we want a business, we got to start up that business by working for free. And that's often due with unacknowledged labor that our people did ancestrally. So, I think there's that reconciliation part that needs to be part of the conversation when talking about things like finance and lending, because that's all temporally based. So that's based in time, right? Like if I work for this amount of time and if I make this amount of money, then I'll be able to pay you back for being able to borrow, said money during said time, right? So it's like that creates certain expectations. You got to be part of the system in very specific ways in order for you to meet those standards. So as folks who, as a people whose existence in this country to be essentially both in a deficit and behind in time because of the deficit, it creates it creates a very difficult playing field.
And Gavin, what do you envision as kind of some of the best ways to shift the playing field and to change, right, the thinking that's driving folks to the routine practices? How do we affect their thinking and show them that there's a better path?
Well, there needs to be a demonstration that there needs to be a demonstration of reparations. And then there needs to be a very well thought out way of, at least from my perspective, because from what I've experienced is that it's like I spent my whole life being behind in time or not knowing certain things that folks just grew up knowing, and then having to take up time in my adult life to figure that out, to be where people were at, so there's how it affected me, then there's how I seen it affected my parents, and so on and so on. So it's like there's a deficit that we're playing out of, and there's a deficit in many forms of capital, right? Because every form of capital I spoke on, you could see how that deficit plays out. Many Black businesses are impacted because they don't have enough workers. They have a great product, they have a great system, but they just don't have enough cash reserves to be able to hire at that 15 now because of inflation, it's like $18-20 range in order to have workers present. So the only way we can make appeal to most of the people involved in our businesses is based on the way we differentiate ourselves. So it's a difficult question. There needs to be a plan of how to navigate that, right? Are we going to organize a group of people from specific descents who are willing to be like, oh, I want to cash infuse 15 Black businesses, and then that has to be the start, right? Because I don't even know if it's equitable if we start collecting data from those effects, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of questions and thoughts that come out of that, but mm-hmm. I think the situation is that folks just don't have resources to build at the capacity that we would like to build. The speed, the pace of the economy in Seattle is very fast. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you got to be at a certain infrastructure to keep up with the demand or to even meet the demand. So it's like, it's like that's a question of navigation. I don't think capital starting out, like businesses of folks who are culturally in a deficit with more of a deficit, is necessarily equitable. Mm-hmm. And then oftentimes these community lending programs, they fund a certain portion. They don't fund the whole business idea. You know, like you're going to start people out on a deficit of 20, 40, 50,000 when they really need $250,000 to meet their market's demand. It's like they're still, so it's an interesting dilemma, but I think we can definitely come to a solution if we keep on thinking about it and acknowledge what the playing field is. I think that's the number one thing. We got to acknowledge that there's a deficit and there's numbers available in order for us to calculate it. I think it's been calculated many times of like how much money is owed. And then then the COVID situation, right? So they're throwing money into neighborhoods, and not necessarily it's like if you're an organization within the neighborhood. So we're seeing how we're seeing models that the government's implementing, and we're seeing models in other institutions that are implementing. It's just a difficult task.
And so I heard you saying kind of demonstrating the deficit and kind of the injustice that's apparent there, and also the potential vision of what's possible. Like we need to be able to demo what's possible and see more experimentation, see the community empowered to experiment more, to show what's possible. And I think that connects a lot to kind of some of the previous conversations. I would love to hear from Dionne and Sandhya as you've worked to develop your own lending programs and sort of push the boundaries in certain areas, but to stay within a certain right frame. I would love to hear from you how you navigate that process in identifying what you need to challenge in developing, say, lending programs that are more equitable and more empowering, and what frame you sort of are forced to stay within. Can you tell us a little bit about that process as you're, Dionne, maybe determining how you're going to do innovative underwriting, like how much latitude you have to expand. Can you tell us about what that process looked like for you as you're developing your program?
Oh yeah, I think some of the things that that you really can't change at this point is, obviously it depends on where you're getting your funds, but the funds have to be paid back. So that's the challenging part from the lender as well. The lender doesn't just have the pool of money to be able to give out or to lend out on their own. So being able to source low to no cost or maybe even negative return funding is key to being able to have access to low cost or no cost loans. And again, I'm talking about loans because that's what I'm doing right now. And any business that is successful does have a loan. And so figuring out the right way to do that to where you can keep those costs low, no application fees, and then make the process as straightforward as possible and alternative as possible, where we're looking at, building that relationship, looking at cash flow, obviously, to see if the loan makes sense for that business. And then also learning about what the business is contributing to the greater community.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, from Community Credit Lab's perspective, it really is a blank slate. The way that we're designing with our partners is, to Dionne's point, there's a desire for the business to be able to support that debt. But that's looked at pretty objectively in terms of, okay, do you have the available cash flow to be able to make payments on your debt? Or will you have that available cash flow once you obtain a piece of equipment or obtain the future job or whatever it might be that can support that future cash flow? So we are really looking at how do we just really remove the traditional frameworks of what we've seen in financial institutions and community development financial institutions of the 5 C's of credit, and really focus on relationship as well as just a plain ability to repay. And I think maybe to also your earlier question, Juguna, and to piggyback off of what Gavin was talking about, I think there's a lot of loss of trust between individuals and financial institutions, especially individuals in people of color within especially the Seattle ecosystem, but even more broadly in the US, there's a lot of lack of trust between them and traditional financial institutions. And there are organizations like Dionne's, Densham Co-op, and other community-based lenders that are really trying to bridge that, rebuild that trust, right? Really partner alongside each organization and support them to get to the next step, and provide them with capital to get to that next step in a very in a partnership way, and not in a traditional lendee relationship. So I think that it will take time, and those relationships need time to heal. But there are organizations out there that are really trying to be more community centered, have more community-based decision making, be more partner oriented instead of more power, kind of having that power dynamic oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of have a question. Do you guys have for both Dionne and Sandhya, do both of you have a like certain requirements in order to qualify for the loan? And is there like certain, is there specific materials that they need to have in order to receive financial assistance from you? Because both of you said cash flow charts, and not every business at the grassroots level has the capacity to measure their cash flow, or it even makes sense for them to measure their cash flow because of their their day-to-day situation.
Yeah. So cash flow can be derived from things like a business bank account. If they have a QuickBooks or some other online accounting software, that would help us see something. Anytime that I ask for documents from applicants, I just ask them to provide me with what they have. Obviously, the more that I have, the more I'm able to corroborate and compare to make a more informed decision. The less information I get, or the mix, like if I get a cash flow that has one amount, but then a bank account that has another amount, that would be ill-advising me to move forward with that loan, because I'm doing a disservice to the business as well to Densham. So I think the best thing is as much information as possible, and it might take longer if all that isn't there right away, but then we can formatively work together to get there through. And it might not even be directly through Densham. It might be connecting with organizations like Central Area Collaborative that might have the hands-on approach to be able to connect with that business. I'm not a big fan of the 10-week accelerator programs, because those things take a lot of time out. Like Gavin was saying, businesses that are in there day and night trying to figure it out, or figuring it out, but gotta work 24 hours to get it going. To take time off to go to an accelerator program doesn't make sense. So with some of the partners that we've connected with, we're looking for ways to get in, get out. Like if someone needs to set up their QuickBooks, let's get in, help them set it up, and then we can print those reports, right? So yeah, we try to make it as simple as possible. But yeah, I don't know if that answers it right there from my perspective.
Yeah, the only thing I would add from my end to answer your question, Gavin, is it's not Community Credit Lab who's asking for those specific things, it's our lending partners who are often business support organizations. So that might be helping provide technical assistance to an organization, or a nonprofit that's working directly with an individual as a case manager. And it's more about how can we, to Dionne's point, how can we use the things that are already there for a business or an individual to help assess, is this the right fit for you at this time? And for the individual or the business to also be working alongside and making that decision as well, and understanding what they might need to get to that point. So we really try to partner with business support organizations or nonprofits that truly understand and can provide that deep one-on-one support to a business or to an individual.
I think that the more organizations and institutions that we're all connected, like if Densham can't provide that, then if we build that network, we know, all right, this organization can provide that, or, this institution has funds for this. So I think the more we build that, the better.
Yeah, thank you. And I think those recommendations are really key. And as we think about like visioning what we want for the future, like Dionne, if you could, wave a magic wand and make some changes into the current ecosystem, what are the type of things you would like to see? Is it an amount of capital? Is it development of the human capital? What do your visions look like?
I think, given the pandemic and everything, I think right now the biggest thing would be to be able to fund businesses that are in an ideal stage would be awesome, because a lot of businesses closed. So that leaves a hole in the community, right? So if we can have businesses that might be in a position to start something that will instantly add value, and to Gavin's point, having that $250,000 up front, that's not an equity type investment that's, taking away from ownership, that would be an ideal situation. Also, having more capital is always helpful, so that we can, build up loan loss reserves, so that those that are contributing to what we're doing feel a little more comfortable contributing in that way, so that we have more lending capital. Having more individuals and organizations that provide that, as Sandhya said, that one-on-one business support services, so where you really sit down and learn a business and try to fill any gaps that they might have. They might be excellent at their core of their business, but maybe the managing side of it needs to be refined on the back end. And for them to be able to focus on what their business is on the front and have support in the back, that's a game changer for a lot of businesses, I think.
Thank you. Gavin or Sandhya, what would you do with your magic wand if you could influence the ecosystem and make some major changes? What would they look like?
I think from my end, and I'm speaking on behalf of Community Credit Labs, and we're really trying to orient towards a financial system that prioritizes people, that prioritizes humanity. It would be absolutely wonderful if across the entire financial industry and financial institution ecosystem, we were wiping some of these slates clean and really reimagining what it could look like to decentralize a lot of these functions, to put the power into the hands of community organizations and community lenders like Dionne, who really knows what each business needs, and who's willing to work alongside them to get there. So I think for me, it's moving from a financial system that's really heavily centralized and focused on efficiency and focused on profits towards one that is focused on people, and one that's focused on support, and one that's focused not necessarily on profit, but also focused on shifting capital in the ways and flowing capital in the ways that it needs to really reach people who have been excluded and extracted from for hundreds of years.
Thank you.
If I had a magic wand, I'd probably do like $50,000 cash infusion to all the Black and brown businesses, so they're able to pay off all their bills, whatever, the tax man, whoever is outside of their local neighborhood or situation and be able to just pay off their debts. So, and then have cash left over. So they're capable of being able to start a new loaning or financial relationship with someone who is within their community. And that will be a way like to fast track localizing the economy. I really do believe in local economies. Like if we could find a way to increase spending within people that we know instead of these national or international conglomerates who just extract from us in so many different ways. It's like asymmetrical extractation. They own everything, and it's like if we could find ways of keeping that dollar amongst one another and fast tracking that, setting up entrepreneur mentorship, apprenticeship relationships and within the youth, like heavily focus on investing in internship programs. So many internship programs with local community entrepreneurs are like crazily successful. A lot of the interns end up becoming inspired to be entrepreneurs themselves and stay working within that community because it creates such a huge amount of connection. And I think that's what's being lost a lot in our neighborhoods because the hyper transition and then the course of the pandemic, we're not as connected. So when a business goes out, it's you don't even know that they go out. You don't know why. You don't even know. You find out they went out like 3-4 months later. You still think they're there, right? And it's because we're just so fragmented right now. So it's like finding ways to use money to create more connection in a legitimate way, and continue and leverage that money to continue that connection.
I love it. Love those visions. I think there's definitely magic in your minds and in your work. And I love particularly what I heard about imagining decentralization, localizing the economy, and sort of building the momentum for something new. And so I know that we've seen right over the COVID crisis, a tremendous amount of funding come to the grassroots to sort of heal the economic damage that's come with COVID. We've seen things that have never happened before, right? Like the SBA giving forgivable loans to businesses all over the country. And so things we never thought we'd see, we have already seen. And so knowing that, right, that is possible, that the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, they do have a magic wand of money. It, from my perspective, would take sort of a collective movement, and we have a lot of organizers in this conference and on this call to get that magic wand moving. And so as we think about creating a broad movement to make those changes possible and feasible, to change the story about what's possible, who would you like to bring around the table that might not be there yet? If we're bringing a movement together to make this magic possible, start with Gavin. Who do we need to bring around the table that's not there yet?
Like a specific person?
Category. Just however you like. If you have a specific name, go for it.
Who we need to bring to the table? Like I'm always into elevating youth voices because they're the future. It's like if you want to get a software patch like really quick, you just talk to someone young because they're the ones that are dealing with the technology. They're dealing with the policies the most. And then even the bailout, the COVID bailout, right? COVID bailout is based on we're betting that the youth is going to pay off our debt, right? So it's like, we got to bring those voices to the table and figure out what they need, what they don't know, compensate for what the educational system is not providing them, and really begin to nurture our sprouts. Shout out to Naima Clark at Nurturing Roots. But that's kind of what I love being able to see is like being open these panels and see young folks and have them be the ones who are contributing to the language that we're developing, the systems that we're developing, and be really engaged with and even be engaging, participating, and creating this new economy that we're staging for.
Right. Thank you, Gavin. Sandhya, who do you think we need to bring around the table to sort of move that magic wand?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And I think this is one that even Community Credit Lab is constantly thinking about. Who is not in these conversations, who needs to be in these conversations. And a lot of times it's the individual borrowers who's at the end, who's actually receiving the capital. And how are we making sure that they are the ones included when these structures are set up, when these frameworks are set up, when the decisions are being made, because oftentimes they're left out of these conversations. And sometimes it's because sometimes the borrowers don't have time to participate, don't have, and there could be a whole host of reasons why they could have not even been asked to participate. But I think continuing to orient towards what does the end user, the borrower, the person who's actually receiving that capital need, and what are their challenges, and how do we incorporate them? I would love for us to have more of that inclusivity of not only from the investor side, but the investor all the way down to the person who's receiving the capital.
Thank you. Dionne.
Yeah, I think for me to round it out, with youth and then also the borrowers, I mean, obviously the ones that have been making, or the ones that, like when you say that federal funds, I know federal funds, they come into Washington, and then the state funds go into the different organizations, or maybe to the larger organizations, and a large organization. It's like this whole filtering effect. So I think the ones that are at that point of making the decision of where funds go on the state level, is really important to build those relationships as well, and have, like I said, the youth and the borrowers and community grassroots members in there, all in the same room making those decisions, so that it's not this siloed off decision of where funds are going. Because I know, for example, a lot of the funds that did come into state, especially like grants, right? They go to CDFIs, and I'm not a CDFI, so I wouldn't have access to that. So it ends up going to the same structures that are there to do the work, which isn't bad in some ways, because CDFIs do have a purpose and they have been here for a long time. At the same time, there might be some missed opportunities with other groups that might be able to get those resources out in the right way. And I did want to go back to one thing about building trust. I think this is going backwards. It's just something I wanted to bring up. I think one of the best ways as a lender to build trust is to provide capital, even when everything isn't tight on the financial side. I know it's easier said than done, and I'm now in a position more to be able to do some of that. So I think when you have a business that has a vision, has some potential financially, to be able to have enough resources to be able to say, all right, we're going to go forward with this loan, and we're going to work together to get you up to a point so that maybe you can be eligible for a larger investment or a larger loan in the future. I think that's one of the best ways to build trust moving forward. Again, easier said than done, but we're working on that.
Yeah, thank you, Dionne. And I hear you. I think building trust in those relationships we see is really critical, and it's a critical part of the unseen infrastructure of how this movement moves, right? These relationships. And so I saw a question in the chat, and Sandhya's already been on top of it, but folks have questions about, how to connect with you all. And so for the folks in our audience who are doing this work, who are excited about what you're doing, how can they stay connected with you, up to date on your work, and maybe start to build those relationships?
Yeah, I'll start off. You can go to our website, www.communitycreditlab.org, and you can sign up to be on our mailing list to continue to be apprised of the work that we're doing. We try to send at least one newsletter a month to connect with everyone and share out work that we're seeing. And then if you're interested in a lending program, I will drop our new partnership manager's email in the chat. Her name is Quenisha Smith, and she'll be happy to talk to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, same for us. You can visit the website. Please feel free to contact me directly through email, and then we have social media presence in conjunction with Seattle Green Book, which is a directory of Black-owned businesses in the state of Washington. Yeah.
Thank you. And Gavin. Oh, it was Gavin. Gavin, how can folks connect with you if we still have you? Looks like Gavin may be having some connection issues. And so this has been a really great discussion. It looks like we just have a few minutes left. If there are any questions from the audience, please post them in the chat. We may be able to tackle them at the end here. But wanted to also give Dionne and Sandhya and Gavin the opportunity to ask any questions or make any final comments. Yeah. So the floor is open.
I guess the only comment that I would make is that there are a lot of organizations in the Seattle and Washington region and outside of the Seattle and Washington region that are really trying to think about how to shift capital to communities that have often been left out of the traditional financial system. And there's, to Dionne's point, how can we continue to learn from one another, continue to direct people in those different areas? We're always trying to, at Community Credit Lab, we're always trying to learn from what others are doing here and outside of the state. So I would just say, keep your eyes open. There's a lot of really important work happening across the nation and that we can all learn from and all build off of.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I myself, I'm an open book, and anything that I've learned, I'm happy to share, because if what we're doing can be replicated and someone else does it better than me and I'm out of business, that's a good thing. That means that the needs being met. So I'm an open book. Feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Thank you, Dionne. Thank you, Sandhya. And also thanks to Gavin. I think this has been a great discussion. As you can see, these leaders are very open to work with and connect with the other leaders on this call. Gavin, I see you're back. We were just wondering if you have any questions or comments as we close things out.
I do not. Oh,
you can also let folks know how they can connect with you if they would like to connect with you and learn about your work.
yes, for sure. I just put my email in the chat. I hope you all can see that. It's been a pleasure. I love having these conversations and being able to, be able to critically think about these things.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our amazing panelists. Thank you to COO for this opportunity to have this conversation. We appreciate meeting the moment as an opportunity to gather this community, build relationships, energize each other, and to learn from each other. I'll give a quick plug to the People's Economy Lab. If you'd like to learn more about our organization, which focuses on really supporting the advancement of the just transition to a regenerative economy centering communities of color, please check us out as peopleseconomy.org. We would love to hear from you. So thank you, everybody, for your time, and have a wonderful day.